Today is our last series together with Stella Jemeljanova, founder and CEO at Explux, on market entry in different regions. So in the past 2 weeks, we covered Africa and Southeast Asia, and today we will deep dive into Latin America. Hi, Stella. Pleasure having you again.
Hi, Armands. Nice to see you again as well.
Great. So I don't know, shall we go with the introduction or not? We probably can also skip this time because we covered that on the last 2 weeks. But very quickly, maybe you can give a motivation on why you created Explux, which is a consultancy on opening lending companies in different regions.
Overall, the idea behind the Explux was to help to the digital lenders to expand their operations to the regions where it's not that easy to find the local experts like Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and where the digital lenders, especially from Europe or some former Soviet Union countries, they feel more safe when expanding with some support of a person who is closer to their country rather than someone who is on the other side of the ocean or of the world as itself.
Okay, great. Yeah, so then why we are talking about Latin America and what are the differences there?
Latin America is, if we take a look at the developing countries, Latin America, I would say, is the most developed part of the world in that sense. But it's important to highlight from the very beginning that Latin America countries, they're also different, same as European countries different. We already discussed Southeast Asia and Africa. For example, there are several factors which influence the development of Latin American countries. One of them, of course, we all know that Latin America is kind of famous with their crime levels, which comes from narco stories and all this stuff like some 10 decades ago. So, and here, today we will not talk about the countries like Venezuela or Honduras, which are still super crime countries and where the politics are super unstable. Of course, it's not attractive for the investors. At the same time, we need to highlight that Latin American countries have very big difference in population. We have Brazil, which has more than 200 million. It's comparable to Indonesia in Southeast Africa. We have Mexico, which follows Brazil with 120 something million people. And then the next two are Colombia and Argentina with around 45 million people, and then the rest follow. So meaning that, again, for investors, biggest economies with more population, if the countries are politically stable, it's much more attractive than, of course, small economies. And even this is very good shown in a fintech development. For example, in Latin America, in total, there are around 2,500 fintechs, approximately. Of course, they cannot count precisely all, and 50% of them, they are coming from Brazil, 20% from Mexico, and only 30% are spread among the rest of the countries. So that's why today we will talk more maybe about this middle segment like Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, which I would say more attractive to the investors rather than, of course, a lower segment or countries which are below them, or Brazil, which is super saturated already, and it's so hard to do the business in Brazil.
Okay. Yeah, but then if we look on considering the differences, so why you think the region is still worth attending? Of course, it's big markets. Some of the countries are more developed, which probably makes the entry way easier. But any other factors, in your opinion?
First of all, digital adoption. Approximately, the mobile penetration rate is more than 100% in the urban areas, and in rural areas, it's more than 50 or 60%. If we again compare with the same Southeast Asia, Latin America doesn't have some thousands of islands, which is again, which raise some showstoppers for the development of the fintechs. So in that sense, it's easier. Second, very important point is the sandboxes. In general, the government in the stable Latin American countries, they are really pushing for the fintech. And for example, as of now, Brazil and Chile, they have already sandboxes ongoing where the fintechs can get into sandbox to test some of their ideas for the business, to get some tax exemptions, to get some help from the associations, etc. At the same time, countries like Mexico, Colombia, they are already in the process of establishing, and Peru, for example, they have ongoing discussion how to do it in the best way. So then I guess very important to mention that Latin America currently has two big language groups. It's Spanish and Portuguese, which is closer to Europeans, and that's why Latin America in general is Europeanized and of course Americanized. So rather than, especially for the people from Europe, rather than, let's say, Southeast Asia, which has a huge impact from China. And last but not least, in Latin America, the fintechs are so diverse. There are so many different payment methods, what we'll discuss later, different digital lending types, that it opens the door for the new ideas rather than you just need to follow what the market has. Otherwise, it's difficult for people to adapt the new solution.
Okay. But then what sort of the attitude toward these investors? Because, for example, well, in Brazil, you mentioned there's a lot of local capital, local companies. So I assume they might be quite protective.
In general, if we consider Latin America, in 2022, it was their peak in getting the foreign investments.
Okay.
And in general, so in that year, 14 billion, so that's a huge number, 14 billion was invested in Latin America into mostly fintech startups. So, okay. And meaning that in general, Latin America, of course, again, Brazil is the top. So, but the rest of the countries, of course, they're also getting something, and it's not again not big, not small numbers, and they already have quite big experience in working with the investors. Indeed, they like the investors from Latin America, especially given that they have countries like Mexico and Brazil, which are tech hubs of Latin America, and there are so many investors there, which are supporting Latin American countries like Mobile, the company which is based in Brazil, and they are investing into different Latin America-based fintechs. Doesn't matter which country, but just in Latin America. So okay. That's why, of course, on one hand, the preferences are going on the side of Latin American investors. On the other hand, given the connection with Europe and very tight connection with USA, that's also not a problem to get the investments from these countries.
Okay. But then maybe more about the Europeans. So is there really like a big track record of Europeans then? Because it seems like these are local funds investing across the region. US, of course, which is super close. But are you aware of any, let's say, major investments from Europe, or at least that there are many players? Did I express myself clearly?
No, let me try
to. What I would like to understand is really about the European presence, because it's quite dominated still by the US and the local investments across the countries.
Some countries indeed they have European presence, and again, Europeans are very famous with our payday lending, especially back to like 5-7 years ago. And that was a peak in approximately 2017 when many Europeans, they launched payday in Mexico and Argentina. So even that time, the Brazil already was pretty tough to do the licensing. It would take forever and a lot of efforts. And in Mexico, there are still many payday loans. They're still alive, and they have some their target audience. Same as Colombia. Recent times, actually, many Europeans, they started to look at Colombia because Mexico, it's saturated, Brazil saturated, Argentina has their problem with the currency, and Colombia is pretty stable and evolving, and the fintech landscape, I mean, the regulation, etc., is also evolving. So, and many people are looking now at Peru and Colombia from our Europe region.
Okay, gotcha. All right,
but sorry, Armands, maybe it's again worth to mention, for example, there is Netherlands company PayU from payments, is one of the top players in the payments field in Latin America. So they're from Europe.
Yeah. All right, good to know. Yeah, but then since we are probably exploring more really on this alternative lending, so what type of products are let's say the most dominant on the market, and where the international investors go into? So you mentioned about payday lending, but any other ones?
In general, I would say that the most common product, and probably again, I cannot say in all the countries, but majority of the countries, it's the consumer loan for 12 to 24 months. And while, let's say, the short-term products are not so popular, because again, there are many local players who are ready to onboard customers digitally almost instantly, and to give the interest rate of, let's say, 5 to 7% a month, even lower for longer products. So of course, then the big question why someone should look for the loan which is 30% a month, if really there are so many options to get this digital loan for a longer term, what is of course more convenient for the customer. And consumer loans, definitely they dominate. Then I would say that next one is SME. So SME is also pretty popular. There are many companies which are doing SME lending. And also I need to highlight that, for example, in Brazil, there are sometimes some lending options, which is same as India, which even we do not understand how does it really work because of their very complicated infrastructure. That there's something with the payment system, for example, that why they can do this lending. But in general, I would say in Latin America, it's very hard to tell, okay, this is really, really dominating. Yeah, consumer lending is dominating, but still the rest of the types of loans, buy now, pay later, super popular. So some even credit cards, especially now with digital banks, it becoming very popular. And another very important thing, of course, digital loans are there, and they are in Latin America for a long time already, but cash is not still out. And giving the loans in cash, it has a risk, because there might be someone who picks up cash who is not actually the applicant, or there was a fraud. Yeah, but at the same time, payments in cash, especially via agent chains, they are super popular in Latin America.
Okay, clear. Yeah, but then maybe let's go into the topic of running the operations, and let's try to see from the moment how we set up and how we start and run the operations. So probably licensing is where to start.
Licensing is to some extent similar to Southeast Asia, where it's regulated, and licensing process has very strictly defined steps which need to be followed. But again, if we're talking about Mexico and Brazil, they have super complicated licensing. There are many points. I mean, you need to provides them hundreds of pages AML, very strict AML policy. In Mexico, actually, one of the key difficulties when it comes to getting the license is AML, because in Mexico, AML authorities is one of the authorities whom, as a digital lender, you report to, and this is primary authority. So it's not the central bank, but when you are non-banking digital lender, you need to report the primary to AML office. And Brazil, again, of course, it has huge requirements coming from starting with a business plan, normal business plan. It's not like few rows in Excel. So of course, governance, so company governance. So, but at the same time, there are countries, as we talked, like Colombia, Peru, Chile, where the licensing is not so complicated and actually it's not so costly. In all these countries, which are not Mexico or Brazil, more or less you can get the license, or somewhere even not license, but the registration with the national bank as a digital lender for like 10 to 20,000 USD. And they do not require huge capital. For example, in Brazil, it's around 200,000 USD must be on the account of the digital lender at the moment of licensing. Here, in those countries with a lower population, that's not a problem at all. So it might be 10,000 USD, for example, capital, which is on the account, but no crazy amounts. And the process is not 1 year or 1.5 years, but the process is like 3-4 months. So pretty attractive for the investors.
Okay, but by the way, a question came up to follow on the procedures in Mexico and Brazil. So getting the license is complex, but then how much of auditing and actually imposing that companies are following those rules? How much of it is in place? Or is it only the application stage, or basically you have annual then audits which come into the company and goes through the operations?
In Brazil, definitely there is a compliance part which needs to be followed after the digital lending obtained. So all the AML again, so monitoring, financial reporting, audit. Mexico, it's mostly, as I mentioned before, it's most about AML. So Mexico, this part. But if we talk about the countries which are out of these two, so then they majority of them, they do not have any implications later on. Maybe you need to submit some report once per year. Yeah, same as, for example, in the Philippines, once a year, all the companies are having the annual audit. So, but that's not a big deal usually. But Brazil and Mexico, yeah, they require the maintenance of the compliance.
Okay, so it's ongoing hustle, not only one time. Good. Okay, we've got the license. So what about data and risk assessment?
Data and risk assessment. First thing, what I would like to mention, that given that almost all these countries, or at least countries which are in our interests, they have a digital lending licensing or at least registration process. It's not like you just opened a regular company and started to give out loans. Majority of these countries, they must report to credit bureaus.
Okay.
However, practice, it's a bit different. Not all of them report. Of course, the big report, but not all of them. But at least when it comes to credit bureaus, the credit bureaus, they have small loans, they have unsecured consumer loans for non-banking digital lenders. But of course, make credit bureaus stronger than in many other countries in developing regions where these companies do not report to credit bureaus at all. At the same time, of course, those are lovely giants as Brazil and Mexico, they have some other additional solutions. For example, there's a company called Belbo. So it's open banking company. The headquarters is in Brazil, if not mistaken, and they're operating in Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia. And they are providing to digital lenders the transactional data about the clients from the banks or e-wallets whom they're integrated with, same as additional identification data, where you can, for example, check the bank account and then name, surname of the person, of the applicant. Also, another interesting player, what we also mentioned in a previous video, it's a Credo Lab, which is from Singapore, but they're operating in Latin America as well. So these guys, they are doing scoring based on mobile application or web application, and they're giving out the alternative score. And also there is a company called RiskSeal. They are, again, operating in Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia. And I would like to refer to what we were talking before, that Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia are the top countries. And that's why we see also these tech solutions, which they exist exactly in those markets. Okay. And RiskSeal, they're doing the scoring based on digital identity of the person. So in those specific countries, and also they're doing biometrics. So, and the rest, I would say the rest, if we exclude the credit bureaus, more or less the companies are using the international providers. Same the Armands, for example, from USA, and some other Innovation or some other providers which are spread worldwide.
All right, good. But then speaking about the customer acquisition, of course, the markets are big, but it doesn't guarantee you that the applications are coming in. So what are the typical acquisition channels?
Sorry. So searching engine is the top, followed with social media. So last time in Southeast Asia, we talked that this is the other way around. Here it's differently. So, and for example, Latin America has 700 million population. Southeast Asia, no, a bit less. Southeast Asia, same. It's around a bit less than 700 million population. And for example, Facebook in Southeast Asia has 60% penetration. In Latin America is around 50% penetration. So meaning that even 10%, they're the small, a bit less than 100 million users of Facebook. At the same time, in these saturated markets like Mexico and Brazil, the cost of acquisition is more than 50 USD. So basically, that's a huge amount. And again, many years ago, it's like 2016, we started with, it was less than 10 USD when we attracted the customer. Now it exceeds already 50 USD, which again highlights how saturated markets are. And another very interesting thing, what I noticed in Latin America, it's very popular to follow the financial institutions on Facebook, not just to see their, just see there some ads, but people are following. For example, this new bank for Brazil, it has 3 million followers on Facebook and on Insta. So, which is not, let's say, the case, in Europe, when people are following Revolut, even in Asia, in Southeast Asia, it's not so popular to follow the financial institutions itself.
Yeah. All right. But what about the typical targets like affiliate networks, brokers? What is their role in LATAM?
There are a lot of huge networks there, and definitely lenders are using them, because when it comes to so big competition, of course, it's very hard to do everything by yourself. Either you need to have very strong army of marketing people who are sitting and doing all the tweaks with attracting the traffic, or you can of course approach the affiliate network, which will do it on your behalf. And actually, once I had an experience with one affiliate network which works in Mexico, and they wanted to work in the Philippines, and in Mexico they were so successful because there is so high demand in affiliate networks, and in Philippines it was very hard for them to get the customers, because many companies, they were doing the marketing by themselves just through Facebook. As we discussed, Facebook is super popular there. So, and basically, even though they are successful in Mexico, they didn't succeed in the Philippines.
Okay, good. Yeah, but then of course, money transactions, we already discussed that cash is still there. But then regarding the payments, so what are the most popular types of payments and transfers? Is it banks or still mobile apps, as we discussed for Southeast Asia and also for Africa?
I guess one thing what is worth to mention here is that in Latin America, there are so many digital banks. Brazil has around 29 banks, digital banks. Mexico, 22 banks.
Okay.
So meaning that people, even they are not really fans maybe of wallets, but they're going to digital banks.
Okay.
Of course, wallets are also there, but comparing to Southeast Asia, where wallets are dominating, if we don't talk about the traditional bank accounts, of course, in Latin America, digital banking is our everything. So, and of course, they boosted the transactions, digital transactions a lot. But I would like to highlight maybe some other interesting thing about Latin America. Wallets are clear. They're popular, digital banks are clear, they're popular, but for example, Mexico, they started to develop the system called CODI, or I hope my pronunciation is correct. Basically, they're introducing the United QR for Mexico, so you can pay everywhere with just one QR code, and you can pay in a different like bills, digital lenders, e-commerce, like on different types of fintechs. Okay. And for example, also there's a company called Boleto Bancario. I guess hope my pronunciation is correct. So these guys, what they're doing in multiple countries. It's Colombia, Brazil, not sure about the rest, maybe in some other. They're giving you QR code, and then you can go to the agent, like bank or convenience store, etc. And through this QR code, you can pay, sorry, not QR code, but a barcode, not QR. And through this barcode, you can pay for your loan, for your bills, to purchase something from the e-commerce. I mean, it's something what I guess we don't have in Europe, South Asia, they do not have it, or Africa, they do not have as well. But in general, these payments, like semi-digital, when you have something part of payment digital, so you've got digitally this barcode, and then you give cash, that's payments that are still super popular in Latin America. And I guess Latin America is a bit unique, and this is something what they're standing out with.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, but then debt collection, of course, not everyone will pay on time. And of course, for example, Mexico, at least when payday lenders entered, the default rates were super high. So how things have changed over the past, I don't know, 5-10 years?
I would say that things have changed in terms of risk assessment rather than debt collection. Okay. Of course, development of direct debit, yeah, it's available in some countries like Brazil, Mexico, if not mistaken. Of course, it helps to prevent those early delayers, but not the heavy ones. Availability of more data and this the fostering of the fintech ecosystem and data help to make better decisions to the lending company. But if we're talking purely about the collections, I wouldn't say that it has developed. And this is what unites all the three continents, that big populations, if we take a look at Brazil, it's a huge territory. I mean, if someone goes to you from one side of Brazil to another, you will never find this person.
Sure.
So this thing, what unites all three regions, it's a pretty early stage, even though some countries, for example, Mexico, they recently adopted the small claim courts. So where for the small, it's less than 10,000 Mexican pesos, around 500 USD, then it's kind of a speed court. But at the same time, it requires the debtor to attend this court. So meaning that it's not really efficient, because the debtor of payday, most likely he will not come to attend this initiated court. And even though, okay, you will get a verdict, even positive one, then again, you need to search for this person, because it doesn't work like in Europe, when there is some additional institution which is in charge of making the verdict true, and for example, to credit or deposit the bank account and all the thing. It doesn't work like this. So basically, still the small claim court, it's not so efficient, even though some countries started to look this way.
Okay. But what about the debt collection agencies? Any portfolio sale opportunities or not at all? And maybe, then it's always a question also about what the discount will be.
Of course, if we talk about Mexico and Brazil, there are some big collections agencies. One of them, for example, is MBA, which is one of the big in Southeast Asia as well. They are in those countries. The rest of the countries, they are definitely less developed in that sense, and there are no actually even buyers for the portfolios, as mostly the companies, the debt collection companies, which are in those, I'm calling it secondary countries after Mexico and Brazil, mostly the debt collection companies are just doing calls and basically, or legal stuff. But legal stuff, again, courts, it's more for big amounts. It's not for a small or even consumer loans for 1,000 or 2,000 USD. So that's why I would say that collections has a very big room for improvement in the countries, but of course, everything again must start with the regulation to help that collection to get improved and be really efficient.
Okay. All right. Well, then moving into the operations from a human resource perspective, because somebody needs to run the operations. So what is, let's say, the general take on local HR resources? So we discussed that in Africa, it's very hard to get qualified people. On the other hand, in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of fintechs, so you can get very well-trained people. So how would that compare to Latin America?
First highlight, of course, is there, again, many fintechs and many foreigners, but at the same time, many fintechs, they are just cross-bordered within Latin America, meaning person from Brazil comes to Peru, for example. And again, as you know, from the culture, from the history, so they were colonized by Spain and Portugal mostly. So there are a few other countries. And again, as we know from our own experience, that people of Spain, Portugal, Italy, they are not the fastest people in the world. And our famous word, mañana. So about this procrastination. And I would say that Latin America is also, it has this culture of mañana. So, and I have to admit that the problem is not about the expertise. The problem is exactly about the culture, that everything must go slow with no rush. If there is some, if the office works until 5, and will work until 5, not earlier, not later. But of course, again, there is younger generation. and it's always worth to mention, which is a bit different already. And because they want to get the place under the sun in this life, I would say that they have less of these habits than, say, the people who are 30 plus.
Okay, interesting. But then maybe what is still what is the need maybe for the international management to come in? So in Africa, we discussed that there is no other way. You must have somebody from your own office traveling and living maybe in Africa to get the quality of work up. What's in Latin America?
As we can see from fintech, again, coming to the point that many fintechs, they are just based in several Latin America countries. I would say that it's enough, even with some international management from more developed country. Like if we want to open the office or the operations in Chile, yeah, maybe we need to bring someone from Brazil, because Brazil, again, is so saturated and competition so high that if you will be having mañana all the time, you will get nowhere. So it's the competition, then you need to work hard. So that's definitely, that would be enough. But in general, I would say that the biggest challenge for the foreigners just to set up the speed of the deliveries, that everything, if we said today, then must be today, not tomorrow or in several weeks.
Okay, good. Yeah, then of course, fintech cannot live without the technology. So, what's your maybe experience with local vendors of the technology? How easy and fast it is to cooperate with them? How professional it is, and maybe also from a technical standpoint, how advanced the technologies vendors are. Because there are regions like in Africa, you can get the API documentation, but it's simply not working. So what about LATAM?
First of all, of course, we can compare this with the investors. So where Latin American investors are sometimes much more preferred than the international ones, Europeans or someone else. Same with the technologies here. And what again makes it scalability, what makes scalability easier for Latin America's tech companies is the language. Because where else you have so many countries which speak same language, even if we talk about two languages, Portuguese and Spanish. Okay, right. There might be dialects, but this is exception. Even sometimes those Portuguese and Spanish, they can understand each other. So it's not the same as in Africa or Southeast Asia or Europe, where each country has its own language. Of course, it makes scalability much easier when you come to another country and people see that you speak their language, they perceive you as a local rather than foreigner. So that would be the advantage of the local Latin American tech companies. Also, if let's say we need to mention some success stories, there's a big success story of Mercado Libre. This is Amazon of Latin America with headquarters in Argentina, by the way, not Brazil. So, and they have many products. They have Mercado Pago, which is a payment, Mercado Libre, which is e-commerce. They started to lend out in some countries. So basically they have a huge ecosystem. Or for example, Rappi, the platform comes from Colombia. It's in several countries, I guess Mexico, Brazil, something else. So again, they are onboarding the e-commerce companies to join their pool to spread it out. We already talked about PayU, the company based in Netherlands. So they managed to get through. Then other two big giants, it's FICO and Salesforce. They're super popular in Latin America. Of course, they're from USA, but again, they managed to get market share there. So I would say that when tech company want to come to Latin America, it's preferable to partner with someone local. It's not must. I would say even it's possible to do by themselves, especially if people know Spanish or Portuguese, depends on the location. It's possible, but you need to be patient because Latin America, when establishing relationship, it's several dinners. It's not just because there are trust issues or something. It's just a culture. We need to have one dinner, second dinners, and lunch, and breakfast, and something else, and then we're friends, and then we can do the business. Of course, the network here, same as Latin America and all these developing countries, the community is the highest priority. So they're got used to community, same family, some neighbor community and other things. So, and of course, that really matters and gives the impact on the business approach.
Okay, good. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, so maybe if you are then an international lender looking at LATAM as the next region to expand, what would actually define your competitive edge?
Again, we need to distinguish here between those advanced countries and less advanced. Yeah, for Mexico or Brazil, I would say that of course, money makes a difference. If you have 1 billion USD and you can spend, you can do whatever you want. Partnerships, very important partnerships, because with a partnership with some key network, same Mercado Libre, yeah, they're looking for some different partners and they're onboarding partners. You can do much more, but in general, those markets are tough things. So it's not for people without experience. It's definitely those markets that are for experienced people. But at the same time, what I like those secondary markets. They're not saturated in general in those secondary markets. If you have a good idea and you can really technically realize and you thought thoroughly, more or less, how this idea will work, then it's possible. But again, the times when investors looked, okay, he did something in this market, I will do same, I will repeat, they are gone. Even in those secondary markets, it will not work anymore. There should be, the business must be sustainable. And that's the key point.
Okay. So no quick profit, even in these tier 2 markets.
Unless there is a luck.
Okay. All right, but then maybe as we will be wrapping up, so let's assume somebody has made a decision that, okay, we see that we can have the competitive edge, we are ready for this, and we want to start working towards LATAM. So what would be, let's say, tips and tricks that can increase the probability of successfully launching the operations?
First thing, I'm actually not a fan of very detailed business plans, because the reality usually changes the plans and you need to improvisation overtakes. So, but still the business plan with all the components must be there. So basically the story of the product development must be logical with some vision, not like, okay, we'll start something and then basically we will figure out what to do next. Latin America is not about this, because again, even in those secondary markets, the competition is already there. And again, big companies like Mercado Libre, they are in those secondary markets, basically the same as you're competing with Amazon, more or less. So the plan, there must be a good plan. Secondly, the dedicated team, because Latin America, it's not, those are not easy markets, even secondary, and you have to have the team who will be working purely on Latin America countries. Because I remember even from my times in for finance, when I started to learn Spanish and I could understand something in Spanish, even talking with the credit bureaus, it made already very big difference, even though I had only basic Spanish. but I already put at least via emails to understand what I need, and it moved on faster. But again, so if there is a big project, you need to have several people who will be really dedicated. And actually, the language matters. You need to have people who are speaking Spanish in the team. It will make huge difference, because many people still in Latin America, even though they work for some good companies, they have pretty basic English. You can communicate with them just how are you, but when you need to go into business details, it's very hard. Even IT guys, when you have some integration, you need someone who will be translator to cover these gaps in language.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So it seems like before making the decision, you need to have some people on the team already, just to go and start exploring. All right, Stella. Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate our discussions in the past 3 weeks. And I think we have a lot of good insights about the differences of the regions and how to enter them. A bit of provocative question maybe. So we covered 3 segments, Africa, LATAM, and also Southeast Asia. Imagine you are a fintech lender from Europe. You probably have a couple of million in your pocket. You do have some experience in the field. So which region you would choose where you would actually try your luck, let's put it like this, probably where you see the biggest probability of success, and where would you go?
Again, depending on my pockets, but in general, it's more pleasant to work, a bit more pleasant to work in Latin America. Business there, people there are more business oriented. It's easier to work with the people. And as we know, working with the people is one of the hardest things what actually is in the business. You can work with Excel, with technologies, but people is essential. That's why in this sense, I would choose Latin America. So, but at the same time, the biggest gaps, as we discussed, they're still in Africa. But Africa requires much more patience and I would say the desire to work in Africa. If you don't have a desire, then the success will be unlikely, will come.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. Again, thank you for joining us for the 3 weeks. And hope to see you in some other FinTech Connect and inGain events.
Thank you so much, Armands, for inviting. It was really a very good 3 sessions from my side. I could combine everything to organize everything. I knew, hopefully, that it will be helpful for some investors or managers to make a decision where to go.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.